I have the beautiful Laurel Designs Spirit Quilt 28. This one, I believe I went for large. If you're going for a quilt, ooh, still a bit nippy out here. If you're going for a quilt that isn't obviously a sleeping bag, then personally I recommend sizing up at least one size, especially if you're a side sleeper. Now, I'm certainly very pleased that I did size up, because I am a side sleeper, and there were a few times when it would just raise up off the bed on one side when I sort of moved around, and occasionally I would get a cool spot just coming, from the side, and sometimes I would just get a little bit of cool air from the side. So I definitely recommend sizing up, to try and alleviate that type of thing. So whatever size you are, at least go one size up. You have a toggle on the front here, and you have clips at the front here and here, so you can clip it together, and effectively your neck is in there, and then obviously you can tighten the draw cord up so it gets quite snug around your neck, and it undoes quite easily. You just pull. I find it easier to pull on that bit there, and then that undoes quite easily. Usually I don't bother doing that. Usually I just sort of snug it around myself, but you have that feature if you want. What I tend to do more is get some bungee cord and tie bungee cord around the loops at the front. They do tend to come undone, but it's just my way of, it's what I like to do. You put your bungee cord there, and then a piece of bungee cord through there with one of these slidey things here, and then that way, if you don't want it too snug around you, but you want it quite close, then you can pull the bungee cord, cinch it down with that, and then that just keeps it close but not too close, and I find that quite useful. Halfway along this one, you have a strip of material and a clip, and basically you can either snug that around you, or what I tend to do is snug it under the sleep mat, just by obviously just putting it through there. And then of course that's, now I will say it's not the greatest of clips. They do slide, which not that much, but they do slide. It's a pretty good fit, but I do find sometimes they slip. So you've just got to keep a bit of an eye on them, that they're done up. Otherwise they might come undone on you, but not so often, but just keep an eye on them. Now, luckily, thankfully, MLD changed the design of the bottom part from a Velcro closure down here to a zip, and that is certainly a good thing. And they have put a long zip on here, which is also a good thing. It's better to have, you know, a little bit too long on the zip. I'm 5'8", and the zip comes up to my upper thighs, I would say. So I'm not at any point sleeping on this here, which is also a good thing. So my backside and everything else like that is not pressing on this. It's not that long, but it certainly is a good old length. At the back end, or the foot end, you have another clip here which you can undo, so you can turn it into a pure quilt if you want to. Personally, I always have the zip done up because I'm a freezing cold sleeper, so I like to be as snug as I possibly can. But of course you can undo it completely. There is this funny little bung here, and what that does, when it's zipped up, as you saw it a minute ago, when you do it up tight, obviously there's a tiny Tony, be careful, a tiny hole there, so you just gotta put that in there. I think that's the idea of it. That's what I do anyway. I quite like squeezing something in that little hole there, get that snugged up, and then that just helps block out any drafts from there. And I must admit, it does work quite well, and I've not had any drafts around my feet. Well, not that I've noticed anyway. Like I said, the only thing I've really noticed is that sometimes when I roll over, it might rise up on one side a little. Other than that, just make sure you go for the right size. You will find these very, very warm and comfortable. Like I said, this is the Spirit Quilt 28. So this is rated at, well, 28 Fahrenheit is about -5 centigrade. I've taken it reasonably comfortably down to about 5 centigrade, which is not that low, but I'm a freezing cold sleeper. So if I was to take this down to -5, I would be frozen. I just couldn't do it. I would be far too cold. Last night it was about 7 degrees. I had a thin down jacket on, a very thin down jacket, but a down jacket nonetheless, despite it being very, very thin. My wind shirt, a fleece, although I might not have had the fleece on last night, I can't quite remember. A t-shirt, and a t-shirt, yeah, and a t-shirt and a shirt. And I had my, I never bring warming clothes. Sometimes I see videos of people recommending that you take heated gloves or heated socks or heated something or other. I never do that. I always make sure that what I'm taking is enough for the conditions I'm going to. And if I needed heated socks, I haven't got the right equipment. You don't need to add the weight of heated socks. If you're taking heated socks, your sleep system is not adequate for what you're doing. End of story. Get a warmer sleeping bag. Obviously, if you can't afford it, then obviously get your heated socks. So I'm being a bit harsh, but you know, really, you shouldn't really be needing things like that. Just make sure that you get the system that is warm enough for you. And I always advocate getting something that is a minimum of 10 degrees centigrade colder rated than what you would be comfortable in. So in this instance, I would be comfortable at 5 degrees in a -5 quilt or bag. Although my -5 PhD sleeping bag, I do take that down to 0, but then that's a down sleeping bag. But I would not be warm in a -5 down sleeping bag at -5. I would be cold then. So just make sure you get something that's warm enough. There's no sewing through. It's basically the synthetic is kind of like loose inside 2 layers of probably some sort of very thin, breathable, very thin momentum material, and it's wafer thin. It's very breathable. I've not had any condensation issues using this. I've had some water spray in from this DD pyramid tarp tent thing, and I had some splash water on here. It doesn't feel damp in any way. I don't think it went through. I think it stayed on the surface and then just dried out naturally. Luckily there wasn't too much rain. It's very warm, very comfortable. Obviously the only real downside is it's obviously somewhat heavier than a down sleeping bag, and of course it won't pack down as tight as a down sleeping bag. So if you're taking a synthetic quilt or sleeping bag with you, that's when you're going to need your bigger rucksack to be able to get your synthetic equipment in, because it won't pack down as tight as a down sleeping bag. But obviously if this got damp or wet, it will still help to keep you warm and comfortable, you know, even if it's damp, and it will still have some insulation properties to it, whereas if down gets wet, you're pretty much screwed, as it say. A quilt, so if you're looking for a synthetic quilt, then, you know, I can definitely highly recommend that you go for one of these MLD quilts. I've used this now on and off the last year. I haven't used it a huge amount, but I've used it on and off, and it has been very, very warm and comfortable for the conditions that I've used it in. So definitely worth a look and see. You know, is this one. Anyway, I'm going to pack it in the pack and you will see it, you know, packed in. Personally, I like individual stuff sacks. I don't go so much for, you know, putting a bag. I mean, I do put a liner bag in my rucksack. This one anyway, this Osprey pack, because it's not waterproof. If I got a waterproof pack, then I don't worry about lining the bag, the pack, the rucksack. But if I haven't got my waterproof pack, then I will still line it these days. I never used to bother, but I do now. And as you can see, you know, it takes up quite a lot of room. It will squish down, but like I said, not as much as a down sleeping bag. So I still think down is king. But if you want synthetic, then this is definitely worth a look. You know, I'll be able to squish it down a little bit tighter than that, I will say. But obviously a down sleeping bag of a similar weight or similar warmth rating would probably come to about here, you know, in this. I will squish it down more. I hope you enjoyed this little review of the MLD Spirit Quilt 28. Don't forget to like, subscribe, notification below, and I'll see you in the next one. Weights, don't forget to add how heavy it is.